celebrating the 1-year anniversary of Black Panther, and we're doing this with a 2-part episode of AP Marvel. Black Panther released in the United States in February 16th, 2018. It was directed by Ryan Coogler. His previous films were Fruitvale Station and Creed. This was produced by Kevin Feige. It also had Nate Moore as a co-producer. It was written by Coogler and Joe Robert Cole, who I believe worked on the People vs. OJ for FX. So this first episode, we're going to talk about Wakanda specifically in the MCU. How does the society function? How does it compare to the comics? The second part will be more on the ending of Black Panther and about T'Challa's solution for outreach to the rest of the world, mainly with the real-life socioeconomic knowledge that we have in mind. These 2 episodes, they're going to go up in mid-February to coincide with the 1-year anniversary, but we are actually recording this on Martin Luther King Day. So I'm going to shut up for the most part of this episode. I'm going to be more of a traffic director. I am the only not black person here. I am Asian American, and my sister likes to joke that I am spiritually white. So with that, I'm going to introduce.
We'll call you an ally today.
Okay,
Yeah.
sure. Well, we are here with Sabrina Clark. Hello, Sabrina.
Hello, everybody.
I think the last time you saw you was I think it was the Daredevil episode, maybe?
It was Daredevil Season 3.
Yeah, and since then we've launched our Patreon, we've launched our Medium page. You are the co-editor of our AP Marvel
Illustrious
venture.
publication.
Yes, very much so. In fact, I'm probably going to have a piece for you to look at this week, actually. Just a warning. But yeah, Sabrina, I think you brought a +1 to this call, did you?
I did. In fact, I brought someone who kind of knows me, I guess. He's all right. It's my brother.
Just a little bit.
Brandon Kessley, is that how you pronounce your last name?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
Hello. You are Sabrina's brother, is that correct?
As last time I checked, I believe so.
That would be
Yeah,
so
this is a
funny if
really-
he said no.
Yeah,
Mom
yeah,
comes
just
out
hide
after
the
this
nepotism,
episode comes
actually.
out.
Yeah,
After this
surprise!
episode
Surprise!
comes out, Mom's like, so here's the thing, you guys.
Brandon, brief intro for yourself for those who do not know exactly what you do, who you might be associated with, etc. Just to give some context for what we're about to hear from you.
Of course. Yes. So, as Chris has already said, my name is Brandon Kessley. Aside from being an overall nerd in all ways, from video games to comics to anime and manga, I am a web developer and technical consultant by trade, and I'm also the co-founder and editor-in-chief of Rising Young Minds, a multi-author blogging platform that is devoted to capturing the various perspectives of our generation and those younger and beyond.
Cool. Do you think the government will be reopened by the time this goes up on the air?
Yeah, mostly because there's a certain testimony coming out the day before my birthday that I think they'll want to change the narrative on.
Yeah, well, we'll see how that goes. This might be an interesting time capsule, that in mind. We have a returning guest. We have Kara Mahorn, a.k.a. the Blurred Girl from our Spider-Verse episode. Would you like to reintroduce yourself?
Sure. What's up, everybody? I'm Karama, aka the Blurred Girl, contributing editor to Sci-Fi Wire, and sort of geek influencer, serial podcaster. And yeah, I get paid to read comic books, and it's kind of cool.
Cool, yeah. And we were all kind of introducing ourselves to each other in the pre-show. We didn't capture any of that, but I think this is going to be a fun little episode we got here.
I agree.
It feels like it.
So,
It feels like it.
Let's do
Yeah.
this.
So let's just jump right into it. Black Panther. So when people were kind of talking about what Wakanda really means, the phrases I heard were like, oh, it's kind of this, imagine this Afrofuturist nation that was untouched by colonialism. So, we've been trying in recent episodes kind of go from person to person in the order of speaking. So let's try Sabrina, Karama, and Brandon in that order. How would you describe the concept or the thesis statement of Wakanda? Whether it's from your knowledge of the comics or from what you saw on screen as Ryan Coogler depicted it. So, Sabrina?
Yeah. I will be, just for context, everybody, as a screenwriter director, I like to give I like to add input based off of that knowledge that I have. So I'm not as strong or as up on the comics, just as a disclaimer. So I really see Wakanda as Afrofuturism in the best possible of all of the ways. It's essentially this hub for a combination of core African ideals and combining all of these various different cultures that already exist in Africa on the sprinkled throughout the continent as a result of certain, diasporic situations. I think that's the proper use of the word. And it also possesses a very strong amount of futuristic technologies and modern mindsets that I think a lot of people do not already automatically attribute to the continent. And through that, I think Coogler did a really good job of bringing all of that vibrancy and all of that complexity that the entire continent has in its own different ways, like based on nation or region, by, I guess, attributing a color or a certain image with each tribe. And I think we're going to talk about this a little bit later when we get to like the monarchy, etc. But I think as Wakanda is a combination or an amalgamation of like all of these different cultures represented throughout the country or throughout the continent, Coogler has brought them all together by finding a way to make them in a way individualized while also completely similar to each other, with the fact that they are all, again, like bright and vibrant, and they're not treated, each individual culture or tribe is not treated as other the way we see it. So just for, I guess, to break that down a little bit more, there's this idea, this concept of otherness that I would, in my opinion, say people generally think of. That's how they see Africa. Like, it's kind of just an other place. I was in the pre-show, I was talking about a reading that I had to do for a class that I'm taking this semester, written by Samuel P. Huntington, if anyone is familiar with The Clash of Civilizations, that came out back in '97. Basically, in that book, he talks about the idea that in the post-Cold War world, everyone's just going to be fighting based off of what civilizations they're in. And he denotes Africa as one of those 8 civilizations, but in parentheses he has possibly, which harkens back to this idea of otherness, because Africa doesn't really have a distinct civilization in terms of, or any distinct characteristics that could really summarize the entire continent, because everyone is so different and every nation or every region has experienced a different amount of external or European influence. And so I think that Coogler proves that, again, by making sure that everyone looks distinct and every image that we get is so individualized, but it all is so cohesive because it's bright and pretty. Boom.
Karama, anything to add to that?
Yeah.
Or your own take on the thesis of Wakanda?
Well, it's interesting because in terms of the comics, I don't think the comics have never, although Coates' run, his first run, especially, was the only comic book run that really went into any of the governing body of Wakanda. It was, what was fascinating in the movie was that Coogler decided to explore this. And it was, whereas the comic was like, it's a solid monarchy / dictatorship with a council of maybe close cabinet members. I really felt that the movie was a monarchy / oligarchy, because I really did feel that if multiple members of his council, which were made up of the 5 tribes, the border tribe, the merchant tribe, the river tribe, and I'm missing one, the mining tribe, that if any of them or 2 of them spoke up against him about something, I feel like the king, that T'Challa would have, it would have swayed him, as opposed, but he does have the power to say, we're doing this no matter what I think. But I do feel that his cabinet, those original bloodline members of the monarchy, let's say, of Wakanda, do have do have a very important role to play in the governing of Wakanda. I was also fascinated. Something that you said, Sabrina, was about the colors, and it's really interesting because Ryan Coogler had a lot to do with those colors. I was friends. You hear me? I wish I was friends with Ruth Carter. I got a
Ruth Carter.
I got
I
a chance
love her.
to interview Ruth Carter, and
Oh my gosh.
I was surprised at how much she said. No, the colors were dictated by Ryan. She handled the fabrics, the textures, and things like that. But it was really Ryan Coogler and Hannah Beekler, who I also got to talk to, who has basically, she's the production designer, who she came up with like this Bible of the look and the feel of Wakanda. And that is what actually dictated most of the movie. But there was a lot of research, because one of the things that Ruth had said is that she had to, when she was talking, basically she didn't sew everything. So Ruth basically had to work with teams of seamstresses and things like that. So it's funny, when I was talking to her, she was like, I had to basically beat the Lion King out of these people, because everybody wanted to put like leopard print, zebra print, and or Coming to America. She's like, that's not what this is. They literally went to artisans and studied from each region's what they would have on. So it's, and the thing also I liked about Wakanda is that Wakanda is not real, but Timbuktu was a real place. And Timbuktu in Africa was a place of, there was a university there. It was a place where people came to study and learn about people from all over the world. So I kind of look at Wakanda as the fictional version of Timbuktu. And the thing that people don't realize about Timbuktu is, even back then, people came from all over Africa and all over the world to study there and would live there and get married and have children there. But that didn't mean that they weren't where they were originally from. So each of those tribes and each of their ethnic groups, which is what I looked at each of those tribes as, were represented. And in fact, Ruth Carter had also said that in every costume, she made sure, because the other thing that people don't realize is the Dora Milaje are from all over Wakanda. They're all from the different tribes. And she had, I did have an article about this up on Sci-Fi, where the plackets, they had this placket that was in the front of their skirt. There weren't that many close-ups on those skirts, but when there were, there's an emblem on each of those skirts representing where each member of the Dora Milaje were from. So some had a fish, some had an antelope, some had a mountain lion. Like, they all had different things, because the Dora Milaje have to look like a united unit. But there's I found that also fascinating, that the security force was from every single one of those tribes, so that he would never feel like, oh, this group isn't represented. Now, I'm going to say after the movie, he best get that sister from the Jabari tribe to be in there too. But, and I also find it fascinating that the movie talks about the 5 tribes, but technically there are 6. It's just that the Jabari chose to stay in the mountains and chose to stay in the old ways, as opposed to become part of the city and become part of the rest of the group. I found that fascinating, and also the concept of the war dogs, because I think there was a little bit of. I've talked to many people who were confused about in the comics they're called Hatut Zeraze, but for I guess ease of use and so that people were not confused, they just called them the war dogs in the movie. They were anybody who was placed outside of Wakanda. I think a lot of people felt that they were just Wakandans in America, but they weren't. And I hope in the next Black Panther movie, we get to see war dogs in France, war dogs in Spain, war dogs in China. You know what I mean? I hope we get to see them all over the world, so that is a little bit clearer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I definitely got a sense that they had like this, even though they weren't publicly outreaching to people, they had presence, kind of around the world. I mean,
Oh
I
yeah.
think they like listed different cities and country, like when Killmonger's trying to get those weapons around. I think he name drops a lot of different cities.
Where they
Can
had
someone remind me
warships.
what the language they use is in the
It's
movies?
It's Hosa.
Hosa.
Yeah. I
learned
can't
it.
do the
Yeah.
click, but it's Hosa.
The
The reason
Hosa.
why they use that language is John Connie, who plays T'Chaka.
Yeah.
He is a famous,
South
he's
Africa.
a famous South African actor. Along with, which a lot of people don't realize, the actress that was from the mining tribe. That was Connie Chiume. She's also a very famous
okay.
in South Africa and Zimbabwe. She's a famous actress. But when John Connie was working on, actually, your favorite movie we were just talking about, Winter
Oh, Civil War.
Civil War,
right,
Civil
yeah.
War,
Yeah.
one of your
Yeah.
favorite. No, I'm sorry, Winter Soldier's your favorite.
Oh, it's
Sorry.
up there.
Okay.
It's up there.
My second favorite.
Civil War. He was in rehearsals. I got to talk. I'm not trying to name drop. I'm just so excited about this movie. But I got a chance to
please
talk to him
do.
on the red carpet, and he had said, because I asked him and his son, I asked him like, what was your biggest? How did you get them to use Hosa? And he said, I literally was in a rehearsal, and I was greeting my son at the UN, and everybody's reading this script, and I said, why in the world, if I'm from a society in Africa that has not exposed itself to the outside world, why on earth would I speak to him in English? And they were like, oh, good point. How would you speak to him? And he said the entire set of lines he just translated immediately into Hausa. And they were like, yes, great, Chadwick, you can learn that, right? And Chadwick was, apparently nervously like, sure, why not? And I think that's the other fascinating thing too, that John Connie, who plays T'Chaka in the movie, his real life son, whose name escapes me right now, his real life son played the young T'Challa, the young King T'Challa in the movie. And they're even seeing all three of them together, their likenesses are so, they do look like they could be actually related, which was fascinating.
It's
yeah,
uncanny.
it really was.
I see what you did there.
John Connie is going to play Rafiki in The Lion King, I believe.
Yes,
Yep.
yes, he is.
Yeah.
Yes, he is.
Brandon, anything on anything we just said, whether it's about the concept of otherness, whether it's about color, and if you want to transition to our next point about the monarchy and hierarchy, feel free to do so.
Thank you. So just to touch on a couple things before doing the pivot, there was some talk about the Dormelage and the Hattusaraze, which was the Dogs of War, which were the spies in the movie and in the comics as well. Originally with the Dormelage, they from the Christopher Priest run back in the 90s, which is actually where we got Everett Ross as well, Martin Freeman's character.
Yeah.
He was he was actually the narrator of that series, and it's very hilarious. So if you guys have not read it, I highly recommend it. I've been telling Sabrina that for like years now. But in that one, they were partially originally supposed to be not just the bodyguards. They're called the Adored Ones because they were technically supposed to be betrothed in a sense, where they're all technically engaged to T'Challa, and that's kind of why it's supposed to be a way of preventing the tribal warfare. But he's not supposed to actually marry any of them or fall with any of them. So I believe in the comic Nakia was one originally.
Yes, she was, and then
then
in the comic they made her crazy, which is
Yeah.
why I'm glad they fixed that in the movie. But they did make her crazy
Yeah.
again in the comic last year, and I was kind of mad because I think Nnedi
Yeah.
Okorafor wrote that one. I'm like, come on, girl.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, we did also talk about the perception of Africa, and the representation of Wakanda. People have to understand that Africa is a continent that has over 1,500 languages. There are myriad ethnic groups that are there, and 54 sovereign nations, so many different tribes, so many different types of people that have coexisted, whether peacefully or otherwise. And the way that Wakanda was represented through the colors, through the fabrics, through the not necessarily costume so much as clothing, the expression, the way that people carry themselves. It's you could see that I don't want to say melting pot, but that combination of cultures represented in the way that the tribes interacted, the way that they represented themselves, the way they presented, how they mixed the modern with the old. How you had the one gentleman with with the plate in his lip, but he's wearing a full suit. I think it's a three-piece suit even.
Mm-hmm.
You know, having things like that, those little anachronisms, it's very interesting. But it's ways for them to maintain the culture, but still embrace the fact that have advanced and they have some exposure to the outside world in some sense. Not necessarily that the world knows everything about them. I think that's something that is kind of confused for that people were confused about, and don't necessarily always doesn't necessarily click with them immediately. Because in the comics, at least T'Challa, he had actually been educated not just in Wakanda, but he had actually gone to the States. He had gone to like Harvard and MIT, I believe, and you know they had gained knowledge from outside of the world, which is how they would learn to speak English and Korean and a whole bunch of other things. But the world thought that they were, as Martin Freeman's character had demonstrated, that they were like a country of farmers, a country like a third world country that was not really capable of doing much, and that was their cover. They were literally hiding in plain sight, as we know already. But this representation, like the way that he described it, in the way that they described it again in the final scene in the UN with the post-credit scene, that's literally how so many people around the world still view the continent of Africa. They don't know about all the technological advancements or the medical advancements that have gone on in places like Ghana, or they don't know that there are so many stable economies on the continent. It's not just all war and corruption and things like that. They don't know about things like that, but they also don't know a lot of the history. They don't know about the Ghana or Mali empires. They don't know about things like that. A lot of times it's just about Egypt, and they kind of move on. There was one other thing I was going to talk about. One other thing.
Well, while you're thinking about that, I just want to jump in and say that I there's one thing I just want to clear up, is that they didn't necessarily have to leave the continent to gain the knowledge and do the things that they did. It's just they did so that they could learn about other cultures. But that is, I think, the big that is like sort of like the issue. And even in the person that you quoted at the beginning, Sabrina, that was talking about like they don't know whether or not Africa would be there or would be advanced enough. I think there's still this mental block, even amongst African Americans and other people in the diaspora, that feel that if it's African, it's not well made, or if it's not quality, or it's not. So that is that's the other reason why seeing Shuri and her whole lab was so impactful. If I had seen Shuri when I was 14, you could have told me nothing. You're like, it's just, so she was, and there was nothing, the way they walked around, because you have to think about it, that nobody in Wakandan society ever had to act quote unquote white or act different so that they would not be oppressed or hurt or anything like that. Like their whole mental, thing was different. And I felt like that was some of the subtleties that were shown on screen. The other issue that we have in this country, also based on, and they have it in Africa too, not just here, and in the islands, is colorism. And you had mentioned the skin tones, and I'd had a conversation with Brian Stelfreeze once, the artist on the first run of Black Panther.
Oh my goodness!
And he actually said that he purposely, and Ryan Coogler would not cop to this when I asked him this, but he had said in the comics, he had purposely made it so that the royal family and anybody who was of any of the tribes was dark skinned, and anybody who was lighter was not royal. Not that they couldn't be, people intermarry or whatever, but that was his little artist basically plug towards, his artistic choice to saying, these are people that are from this earth, they are from here. They are not from anywhere else. They didn't immigrate in. They've actually, this is the bloodline. You can tell if you're looking at a family who's actually part of the royal bloodline because they are the darker ones, which is why I also think they made Zezi not light skinned, but lighter, who is the enemy in the first run.
Yes, from the coach run, right? Yeah. Oh man, it's so Stealth Reese's art is fantastic.
If you ever get a chance to go to New York Comic Con or San Diego Comic Con, he is very, very, very open. He will literally sit there and talk to whoever comes up to his table. I tell people who are artists all the time, show him your art. He loves talking to artists. He loves talking to young artists. Like, if you say you're in college or something, or this is the first time you've done anything, he will stop what he's doing and he will talk to you. He's just the sweetest, sweetest person, and he absolutely loves what he does.
That's so dope.
That is awesome.
I would like to go back to the points about Shuri here. And, go back to my good old pal Huntington. Because he also has a conversation, mind you, Clash of Civilizations was written back in 97, which is when I was born. Hi. So I feel really connected. I'm legal now. I can stay out when I wanna. But he has this section where he's talking about modernization versus westernization. And that idea that modernization is specifically like the things that are actually considered a part of modernization is industrialization, right? But industrialization looks different everywhere. There are other things too, but first, industrialization, right? We have tools and technology versus agriculture and geography, and how all those things are weaving in together to make the industry that the amount of industries that works for each individual nation. So like when we look at Wakanda and we see all of these really cool advanced technologies, we're instantly thinking, oh, well, if Shuri had all of this, like or if Wakanda had all of this, why aren't they sharing it with everybody? This idea that this is like sort of the pinnacle or the null. Am I saying that right? Right. So that is your sort of like your zero. Your ground zero is this idea of really like tricked out technology when all of that is so new, and we're also so because of that, we're not taking into account all of the other pieces of technology that are important to other cultures and that are considered modern for other cultures, right?
True.
Also, with modernization, like the other characteristics of it are urbanization, literacy and education, and wealth and social mobility. Yep. All four of those categories are all in Black Panther. We are seeing, we have seen it urban. We've seen it a little bit more. We've seen the agricultural side. We see how those two kind of work together. We've seen that they have access. They are an incredibly literate people with access to higher education, and there are, which I think we're getting to now. There are the wealthy, and there's an opportunity to mobilize and move up in the world. And for some reason, all of those attributes are equated with westernization and with Western societies, and that only Western societies are literate or have access to vast amounts of technology, when that's not really the case. And I just think it's really interesting because giving such a positive, we all know that this movie is important because it gives such a positive outlook on Africa, but then it's that double-edged sword, like, could be kind of problematic because people are saying, like, this is how it should be, this idyllic utopian idea that might not be actually accessible based off of how Africa is today.
I agree with all of that, except I think there's one thing that was also represented in the movie that you didn't mention, and that is spirituality. Mm-hmm. And also the blending of spirituality and culture with technology, which is not that strange. So, for instance, when vibranium based on the comics, or the laws of this universe, this fictional universe, vibranium is very affected by sound, almost like the
Yeah,
symbiont that is, that's affected by sound. So,
from Spider-Man. Yeah,
and if you notice when the River Tribe is having their ceremony on the way to the falls, and there's a lot of people that missed this. They missed that last. They're singing and they're dancing and they're building up energy so that last stomp of the vibranium spears sends that vibration down into the water to basically unplug that
yeah,
giant like tub drain that was down there, so that half of the falls drain off so that they can actually have this ceremony. So the plane wouldn't have been able to fly, the ship wouldn't have been able to fly between those two mountains if that water hadn't gone down. And a lot of people, I think, miss that.
I missed that. I didn't know.
Oh yeah, yeah. That's one of the coolest.
Yeah, when they
things.
dance and then they stomp and then it goes under the water and
Yeah.
you see that big boulder underground move. Then you see all the water basically going down, and then the next shot you see is the ship going through. That ship couldn't have gone through
Right.
there before that dance because the whole thing was full of water. So that's how they create the falls for that. For that dance. And then the other thing obviously is his walk on the spiritual plane to talk to his father. They do this on a regular basis, so they can talk to the ancestors or whatever, and they make it like, yeah, this is normal, this is what we do. So it's this fascinating blend of spirituality and technology. Like, you know how the whole thing, like your mom has eyes in the back of her head, she could like see you doing things, you don't know how she does that. What if there was
like she does in the movie?
Right. What if there was an herb that could enhance that, where she really could have 360 vision? I mean, we get our butts beat all the time, but I'm just saying, like, that's the fascinating part, and that's a part that's never touched on, because in terms of quote unquote academic scholarship, if it's not a Western type of religion or tradition, it is not looked at as a science. Whereas a lot of these other cultures, think of how many cultures have medicine men but no priests. That medicine man, that doctor is the priest. And it's very fascinating how that was also woven into the story, and how it's often ignored in, like you said, in like Western texts.
Yeah.
Man, y'all are answering my questions before I even get to answer.
Oh, sorry.
Because I was so curious about. I've listened to Ryan Coogler's commentary on the movie, like the director's commentary, and the phrase he kept mentioning over and over again was tradition versus innovation.
Yeah.
So I guess the question I was gonna ask was like, is it more of a blend, or is it more of a push and pull conflict? Because I was thinking about when M'Baku, played by a very charismatic Winston Duke in the film, he kind of goes on this speech during the ritual, and he cites the technological innovations from a little girl, and he kind of like threateningly approaches Shuri. So, Brandon, we can start with you. I mean, was there ever like a conflict, or is it like are tradition and innovation like perfectly like in sync with each other in the movie?
I think, and this is going based off partially from comics, partially from the film, and partially from like my observation and interpretation. I don't think M'Baku's speech was necessarily fighting against the advancement, because when you look at later on when they go to his lair, it's pretty well advanced and pretty lit itself in its own humble way. I think it's more he's more insulted, and you can see it and you can hear it as well. He's insulted that all this advancement is being led by this teenage girl, as opposed to the other elders that in especially in African tribes, in African cultures and things like that. There's this sense of seniority and filial piety and things like that, where you're older, therefore you have that. There's this sense of entitlement due to age, and so when you have something like that level of responsibility, where the entire nation's technology is being overseen by a 16-year-old child, that is insulting to some people, and they really take it personally. So that was the way that I interpreted that. Not necessarily that he's fighting against the advancement. He's just like, this advancement is being led by a child, literally.
Yeah.
I actually think, though, in the movie, though, the way they describe the Jabari in the beginning as turning their backs on technology, I think for years that they were, but then they did gain they did, like you said, his lair doesn't have any electricity in it.
Yeah.
They, and even in the comics, it's funny. The Nnedi Okorafor run on, she had 2 or 3 short runs on Black Panther last year.
True.
And the not just Shuri, she had before Shuri, she had, oh god, what was it called? Black Panther Long Live the King. There was a 6-part series, and she did 3 of them. She talked about not just the technology that's throughout the kingdom, but she also showed the Jabari having technology, but not in the same way that, not using it the same way that the Panther tribe used it. The other thing that I noticed, that this is weird, and this is just me maybe, but I felt in the movie that the Jabari were distinctly patriarchal, whereas the Panther tribe, as they've been represented in the comics anyway, have been matriarchal. Like in the comics, Shuri has become a ruler a couple of times. In Coates' run, when she was in stasis, Ramonda was running the country as the Queen Mother. Yeah. I don't think I get the feeling that in the Jabari tribe that might not be allowed. So I felt like it was both the technology, and then also, like you said, the elder thing. But I do feel like they were against, I think not just, it wasn't technology itself, but they were against the Panther tribe having access and the keys to all of it. I think that was also the Jabari's issue. Like, if you weren't paying so much attention to all this tech, you might have been able to save your own father. You know, like, I think that might have been his thing as well.
It's sort of like an old world, new world mentality dichotomy thing, because as Brandon said, with the elders, that idea of tradition is so important. And I think in terms of Wakanda modernizing and using vibranium in all these different ways and advancing technologically, we're losing, I think the Jabari feel that they've sort of lost touch with themselves, or that the remainder of the tribes have sort of lost touch with the idea of like protecting their individual cultures, and so they sequester themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah,
remember when Marvel used to do those one shots after the movies? Like in between certain movies, they'd have those little shorts. Yep. How badly do you want like one shots on each of these tribes? Like, I want
let
like,
me write it, bro.
That would be amazing.
I want a Game of Thrones HBO like miniseries. Like, that's kind of what I want.
It's coming. Ryan, hit me up. Hello.
Ryan, Kevin.
I graduate May 19th. Hello.
Ryan, Kevin, let's go. Let's talk.
Caramel, have you talked to Ryan Coogler on the red carpet?
No, I did not. But
the elusive one.
I will say this though: I did get a chance to talk to him in the press junket, and I think my voice. But I'm sorry, not in the press junket. I'm sorry, I misspoke. The press conference. And you actually do hear my voice in the press conference, because I'm actually one of the few people that asked a comic book related question. Because everybody else was asking like all these like Disney kind of questions, and I was like, if y'all don't ask this man about which comic he pulled this movie from, it was so funny. But it was a
mixture.
Yeah, it was absolutely a mixture, and he admitted that from the very first time you see Black Panther, right all the way up to not just Priest, but all the other runs in between.
Yeah.
You saw bits and pieces. But what I did like, this movie distinctly felt like it had the colors and the artistic touch of Selfreeze.
Yeah.
It really is, especially in certain parts. But Hannah Beachler is phenomenal. And honestly, we gotta say, also the DP to Black Panther, and I have to look up her name real quick, but she, Rachel Morrison, yes. Mm-hmm. Okay. I mean, remember the fight scene between T'Challa and Killmonger, and the water and the light that was coming through as the sun went down? I was like, oh my God. Like, it was just so beautifully executed. Like, there were these moments like that, even in terms of color, the subtleties that they gave to not just Africans but African Americans. Like when they are in the club, when Nakia, T'Challa, and Okoye walk into the club, and they stand at the railing. If you look at what they're wearing red, black, and green.
Yeah.
And that's
I
like
remember that.
all those little moments, you know, where
They're
you're
so
like,
important.
Yeah, they are.
Yeah, the Pan-African colors.
Yeah, and there's just so it was an ode to both. But it's funny because Killmonger and the concept of Killmonger is actually one of the reasons why I think if there was a nation state like Wakanda that did open its borders, the Killmongers of the West would be the first to, I think, go over there and be like, yo, what's good? And I think that I felt that was very real.
Ooh, actually, it's funny you bring that up. Okay, so Sabrina and I, our family is actually from Liberia, and that's in some sense kind of what happened there. So
Yes,
in
it is.
yeah, so in Africa,
Full circle.
Yeah, I do remember what I wanted to say before, and it was on this note actually. So the concept of having an African nation that was not touched by colonialism per se, we have two examples of that in the real world with Ethiopia and Liberia. Liberia was a special case because there were the freedmen, the freed slaves after the Civil War during that Pan African movement who went back and wanted to, get back in touch with whatever they had left of their roots. And a lot of the freedmen had settled in that area in West Africa, and they had mingled with the tribes and the native Liberians, and then ended up forming that nation. But at the same time, like that, there's still a rift that exists between the freedmen and the descendants of the freedmen, who are referred to as the Americo-Liberians, and the native Liberians.
Right, because they ain't from there. They ain't from there.
Exactly. But they're yeah, but exactly. So the native Liberians, a lot of them felt like the Americo-Liberians just like the freedmen just kind of came in and just kind of took land and then started saying that we're a country, and they're just like, whoa, that's not really how that works. It's a very interesting history, but yeah, like I think that in some sense Killmonger does represent that aspect, as well as being that I wrote a piece on this actually about Killmonger's view of the world in some sense, well, portion of a piece, but he does feel like that sorry, the child of the diaspora, and the representation of that complex relationship between the children of the diaspora that we have.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, and it's and I think that's such a perfect analogy. My mother's not from this country; she's from Bermuda, and my father's from down south. And it was really funny growing up. I used to hear some of the conversations they were having because my father, that sounded so much like everybody that I know that is first gen or has a parent that like has one or two parents that was not from this country, had this that is of Caribbean or African descent, had the same conversation that I did. We were like, how many of that Killmonger T'Challa conversation, how much of that was your relatives at a family event? Yep. Like, I have had that conversation, like hearing people like, why do you keep talking about slavery? Get over it, get a job. On one end, in the same family as, do you have any idea what has happened to African Americans in this country? And it's
every Thanksgiving.
At Christmas. We had that conversation at Christmas.
Yes, yeah,
Thanksgiving,
we did.
Christmas, birthdays, weddings, funerals. Funerals are bad because people
funerals
drinking.
are so bad, bro.
So bad.
And it's this weird thing being the kid hearing all this stuff, and you're asked to choose. Like, nobody looks at me like when I tell people my mother is an immigrant and I say she's from Bermuda, they're like, not really, and I'm like, yeah, really. She had to get a green card and everything, and be naturalized and then become a citizen. But it's funny how so many people don't look at the Caribbean and Black folks as like immigrants. It's weird. It's like European and Latinos from the mainstream are looked at, or people of Latin descent, I should say, are looked at as immigrants, but not the rest of us, and especially not Africa. And then the other thing you were hearing were the other, not even children of African parents, but actual young people who are African who were laughing at all of the garb that people were wearing to see Black Panther, because they were like, yeah, I don't even understand. You got like a gele on from Nigeria and like a rapper on from Ghana. Like, you don't even know what you're wearing. And it was like, yeah, but let them have their moment, because we're descendants of slaves over here.
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, so all of these interesting discussions came out of Black Panther among people from the diaspora. I was having more interesting conversations with people like yourselves who had one parent or both from another country.
Yeah.
Than I was from here, because we have a different way of looking at things, because we have to navigate many times. My boyfriend's Haitian, so he has to navigate even another language when he goes home.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like, so it's interesting, but it's like a culture within a culture, because from the outside looking in, we're all looked at as African Americans. And I was born here. I'm not saying I don't claim that, but it's interesting seeing that movie, how it's like I remember saying, like, this is the intersectionality of the African culture, the diaspora culture, that we don't see. And that's the part that, even when people said, oh, that movie wasn't really diverse, it had only Black people, I'm like, no, Lupita Nyong'o is Black and Latina, and you know what I mean? There was
Denai Guerrera,
and I did get to talk to her too. Sorry, but they did have to all speak. They did have to speak. They had to fit. She said at one point on the set there was like 17 languages going.
Yes.
Yeah.
But people don't look at Africa like that, because people forget, like you said, that Africa is a continent and not a state.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly.
I would also like to go back to the point about Ethiopia and whether or not Wakanda would exactly exist. Because I think that I looked up the map, because I was like, where is Wakanda on the map of Africa, right?
No, but here's the thing: it's moved 3 times in the comics.
Yeah.
In the movie,
almost,
Yeah, in the movie, I feel like they made it in West Africa, but their accents were clearly from South Africa and Zimbabwe.
Yes.
And then in the comics, it's moved from east to west to south. So it's like,
it's like, it doesn't make sense. But it's funny that in the comics, like, here, where does it say? Well, I don't remember what issue it was, and I'm not going to pretend that I know that stuff. But on the map that I found on good old Google, Wakanda's like cut out of Ethiopia, essentially.
Yeah.
Like there are a bunch of other fictional countries here, like Uganda, Canaan.
Yeah. I remember.
I can't read that other one. And so I just think that's so funny, because it's like basically saying that, not that Ethiopia is the pinnacle, but, you know, again, that idea of being untouched. And that is, if Wakanda was geographically right there, absolutely think that it would be totally realistic for them to have said, oh, hey, by the way, this whole time we had these resources. It's like, oh, yeah, you were in Ethiopia, of course.
Yeah, I think from what I remember, it has moved around a bit. I think for the movie, it was kind of South Central in a sense, where not near Tanzania or Kenya, maybe closer to Congo. Maybe closer to Congo, I think.
Yeah,
it was supposed to be.
I think you're right.
So that way, it's kind of landlocked, but it has access to water still. Because it's not like a Zanzibar where it's literally in the middle of South Africa, although it could very well be.
Yeah, I have to wonder like how much they thought about that behind the scenes, because I think the first time you technically see Wakanda on the MCU map is like some random Easter egg in Iron Man 2, and like, you know, who even knows like what they were thinking about their plans about Black Panther were at that point.
No, Age of Ultron, because Andy Serkis was in it.
Oh yeah, Andy Serkis, who I think Coogler was saying in the commentary, like, he made him wear a lot of blue, and he used blue as the, you know, when he's talking about the Pan-African flag, he's also talking about blue as a contrast, as like the color to represent colonialism.
Yeah.
Which I thought was interesting.
There's a lot of blue light on him.
Yep.
Yeah, exactly.
Like that interrogation scene, eh?
Yes.
Oh yeah, yeah. Let's talk a little bit about, let's kind of pivot. I think if we want to try to keep this to an hour, I think we have like 10 minutes left, but this is a really great conversation. I'm learning a lot today.
Yes, we stand a real ally.
Yeah.
Yes.
That's me, I guess. I'm so curious about what you make of life on the ground level of Wakanda, because we see, we see the monarchy part of it. We see it. I mean, it's a T'Challa movie, so naturally we're going to see from the very top down. But there are brief scenes where they're walking amongst the people.
Right.
People are.
Yeah.
They're like marketplaces. They're selling their wares, and like they even have like cool like wrist screens or whatever the hell they are. But that's kind of why I said like, oh man, I want to see an HBO miniseries. I guess Disney Plus technically, but I want to see like a full series that kind of fleshes out like what is life around here. Granted,
exactly. like they're gonna give Wanda and Vision a show on Disney. I'm like, bump that. Give Shuri.
Yeah, bro. I'm ready to see what she's doing. Every day.
Shuri's still alive right now. That's
Shuri made it out.
Duh.
I saw her name in.
She was classified as missing in the Endgame trailer, but that doesn't necessarily mean she's dead. Because it also said Scott Lang is missing.
Well, but that's because they didn't know whether or not Scott Lang was there. He wasn't with them, but they were in Wakanda.
Yeah.
So I don't know. It could be a misdirect. They've done it before, like they did in the Infinity War trailer with how many stones Thanos actually had. So you never know. And plus with the Hulk, I mean that was a huge misdirect.
But okay, I have it on good authority that she's not dead.
Whew,
okay, that's all I can say.
Okay,
I'm not
gonna. Okay. Real one. Okay.
Don't worry about that. Worry about the rest of them. But
I will worry about the rest of them. Yeah.
But Shuri's okay. Worry about T'Challa. But you know what they could do? They could with the next. Well, no. Infinity War Part 2 comes out before Black Panther. So yeah. So it's gonna be. They're not gonna do what they did with. Far From Home, and it's like, oh look, we don't know where this is, but he's still alive.
I know, right? Okay.
Yeah.
We'll talk about that during our.
I feel great, Mr. Stark.
I know, but back to what you asked about. Yes, there's only really one scene where they walked around Bernardana, which is the downtown, like the capital of Wakanda. But in the comics, they've explored it much more, and again, I'm going to go back to the Nnedi Okorafor. Just those 3 issues that it's so funny because I feel bad that I didn't review those comics because I thought they were going to be have a much bigger fanfare, but I'm going to have to go back and maybe like do a little follow up so that people can see like there's some information in here. Basically in those 3 issues, Long Live the King, T'Challa's power, and I'm not going to give it all away, but T'Challa's suit is depowered for a reason. And he has to go investigate something that happened. It's sort of like a large EMP kind of thing that happens. So he has to go find out what has happened in this area, and he is on foot. So you actually are running into not just people, but young people that are living in not just in the city, but just outside the outskirts. And he's learning not just what people have reported back to him about what's going on, but like what it's like day-to-day life. And they're like, dude, I know you think this war is over, but there's some stuff going on. So I kind of wish that there was a story like that we could see, like when we're talking about like those one shots. But I really feel, but again, the blending of technology and even spirituality. There was even a guy walking around with a plate in his lip there. It seems like the Komoyo beads are not just for royals. Other people have Komoyo beads. I do know that they're different beads for different things. Like not every bead on her wrist could have been pushed into Ross's back. Like there's medical beads, there's communication beads, there's
it's like a Pandora bracelet, but for
exactly. Except I want one of the beads to have like a Snapchat beauty filter built in, so I can just turn it on whenever I need it, and I don't have to put makeup on and I look fine.
Sorry, are Komoyo beads are they like the AirPods of Wakanda? Like...
I know, right? It's like an Apple Watch.
Adam first.
But it's all of it. It's an AirPod, an Apple Watch. It's all of it all together. Exactly. Exactly.
I would like to answer this question in terms of like, let's say I'm a 21-year-old college student in Wakanda studying at Wakanda University, right? Mm-hmm. I feel like my parents would be living just outside the city.
Which tribe are you from?
That's a really
Role
great
play now.
Yes.
I don't know. What are all of them again?
the border tribe, the mining tribe, the river tribe. That's the one that Nakia is from.
Yeah, Wakabi's the border tribe.
Would you say?
I said Wakabi's the border tribe.
The border tribe, right?
Yeah.
Oh, I see. I have no idea what tribe I would be from. Brandon,
It's like the sorting
help me
hat.
out.
Like...
But I feel like it would be like commuting into the city, or living in the city, going to visit my parents on the weekends, and then maybe, we sell some wares in the marketplace every now and again. There's like a nice community event at the university, and kids come and get tutored there. And I just think it's like a normal, I feel like it's just like an African Asgard. You know what I'm saying?
I mean, yes, it is, definitely. At least the way that it's been presented so far. In a lot of ways, it is. As for tribes, I'm going to go on a limb and say you'd probably be River Tribe.
I was gonna say that, but then so when you said River Tribe, I was like, but I'm not like Katara, and I was like, whoa, sorry, wrong universe.
No, yeah, I didn't
because
say
I'm definitely an earthbender.
Waterbender. I didn't say water. You can be an earthbender from the River Tribe.
Right.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
I'm an earthbender from the River Tribe.
You realize that has to go in your Twitter profile now, right?
Oh my god, yeah. I just redid my
you have
bio
to.
too, but I'm right.
I have to. Then we'll tweet
gonna
at
do it.
Serena Williams too.
Yeah, dude.
Brandon, was it you who said that T'Challa was like in the comics? He studied. Was it Harvard? I think. Where did he study again?
Yeah, T'Challa studied at Harvard. No, at Princeton and MIT, I believe.
Princeton and MIT.
I knew
Okay.
MIT was one of them. I couldn't remember the other one.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
does he then
went to
know?
Princeton.
Does he then know Tony from MIT?
No, that's
Class
the funny.
of,
That's the
Like
funny
the
thing.
alumni gang?
No, there's actually a really, really funny. Okay, this shows you how much of a geek I am.
Yeah.
I really think DC does a better job. Sorry, of their animated series than Marvel does. But
They do.
Marvel's Earth's Mightiest Heroes,
Yes.
right?
Yes.
And there's a very funny scene between him and T'Challa, and Tony's like, "Yeah, I don't remember you." He was like, "That would be because I was so far ahead of you." Pass.
Yes, I remember.
Tony's
yeah.
like, "But I'm." Tony's entire attitude is like, and I'm not. Obviously, I don't remember all the lines, but Tony's attitude is like, "But I'm a genius," and T'Challa's like, "But
So
are
am
you?
I.
Though? Are you really?"
T'Challa's in T'Challa's in like the Facebook alumni group. Like,
Pretty
No,
much.
he's like, "You're a genius, but I'm a genius and a king." So.
whoa.
He's like, so sit your ass down.
Exactly.
Take several seats.
Yeah, I love T'Challa and Tony's banter in the animated series. Not the one that's
That
out
is-
now, that's different.
Yeah.
But the one Earth's Mightiest Heroes was hilarious.
Actually,
Yeah, people did like
yeah,
that
we
series
used
a
to
lot.
watch that series. We used to watch that series actually. I watched it like 3 times at this point. It's one of my favorites.
It's definitely worth a rewatch if anybody hasn't seen it. It's just that's another one you could just put on and just clean the house.
Yep.
Yeah,
Yes.
there you go.
Yes, it is. Yes. I see.
hope it's still on
That's what.
Netflix. I don't
That's
know
what
if it's
I
still
was
there,
doing.
but,
That's what I was doing. I was watching. I was watching that while I was doing my laundry. She was watching Inception and Winter Soldier. I was watching the Earth's Mightiest Heroes.
Yeah, see, I was saying I watch Winter Soldier at the gym, but yeah, it's usually like Ghost of the Shell if I'm cleaning the house. But the animated series, the anime. But getting back to Marvel, this is honestly we could. I think you should have another show about role playing in Wakanda. We could all come up with the next 3 scripts, and then Sabrina could write them, and then we could all make money.
Boom, done.
Hey.
That's
You're
it.
just
We
Ryan
need.
Coogler and,
Listen, Kevin
Mikey.
Feige, listen up, buddy.
Nick
We've
Moore,
made your
Brian,
job
Cole.
so easy, bro.
Can Brian?
All
still
you have to
please?
do, if you really want true, accurate representation from, more authentic voices of color, you already have your whole gang. We're ready. We're ready.
So ready. So ready. Can we get
I gathered
Brian?
them all together. They're right here.
They're right here.
Chris just wants
Okay.
to find his feet.
What's up?
Chris just wants to find his feet. That's all.
Yeah, exactly.
Secure the bag, Chris.
The one,
Yeah,
yeah.
we all eating. All of us. Everybody eating.
But this is great. This has been an awesome conversation.
I
Yes,
really love you
yes.
guys.
Yeah. I think we can wrap part 1 up. I'm so kind of curious of like Sabrina, like she kind of talked about the hypothetical Wakanda University, and I'm like, my mom is very critical of Shuri because it's like, how'd you get so smart? She doesn't have any lab assistants, like yada yada yada, and that, I sort of roll my eyes, but at the same time, like, like how like, what is education in Wakanda like? Are they preparing them to
True.
go around the world and like be war dog like people, or are they are they just meant to support whatever society or whatever infrastructure they have within their own country?
Oh wait, are you still recording?
Yeah. So just one more question before we wrap this first part up, I guess.
I think they would. I think pre Civil War. I'm sorry. Yeah, pre Civil War, where they go outside of Wakanda. Yeah. They literally would be. They would be learning what they needed to learn about the outside world, but being able to take also all the technology, take it back to their own tribes. I mean, that Wakanda still needs architects and and plumbers and computer scientists and things like that. And all those disciplines need to be studied. And there's nothing wrong with this. Is in this country, we're used to going away, leaving home, going away to school, and never coming back.
Right.
But that's actually not very African. Especially if you have come from a long line, you would take what you learn and come back, and then either and work, and you would share your. And I'm obviously I'm generalizing. Yes, Africa is the continent, but I'm just saying that in terms of Western culture sounds very strange. But going back home might not be one house. Home might be a compound of houses. Yep. Home might just like in even in the islands, and I got half my family that's all on one, like, call it a hill, but it's like all the houses are close together. It's just something that you do. So it wouldn't be strange for someone to learn a trade and even get a doctorate or whatever, and then go back to their, like we said, border tribe, mining tribe, whatever, and become a doctor there, or a dentist, or somebody's got to clean these kids' teeth. So there's still stuff that that they would be right. that they would learn.
No, you're exactly right. One of the things that is definitely important, and I think that's what you definitely just said that really just stuck out, is that sharing of knowledge. And that's kind of how humanity in general has survived, and that's kind of what sets us apart as a species, where we kind of thrive off of preparing the next generation by passing on knowledge. All the knowledge that was gained from the generations past, the knowledge that we've pulled from ancient civilizations, from different civilizations around the world. Once people started traveling, they started learning from each other, they usually took it back to their country. So I think it definitely makes sense that even if people people in Wakanda, for example, would in some sense go somewhere and then learn it and then take it back, even if they were advanced and wouldn't necessarily need to leave. I think it would still make some sense for them to get that first-hand experience, even if it's just like a war dog assignment or something like that. Or because I mean, and we might talk about that in the next thing as well. But I mean, the war dogs tend to have a different outlook on life, and that's something that was touched on in the film as well. I mean, between Nakia and Njobu. But you learn more when you're exposed to other cultures. Otherwise, you just remain very insular, and you have a kind of monolithic train of thought in some sense. So I think it was definitely something that they probably would have stressed, especially for the royal family. But they probably would have stressed for people to get some level of education outside of the country and then bring it back.
Man, that's a perfect transition to what we're going to talk about in part 2. Sabrina, any final word before we wrap up part 1?
No. Everyone go pick up a copy of Samuel P. Huntington's The Clash of Civilizations if you would like to know more about that.
Yeah. Cool. Okay, let's wrap up this first part. So let's do our social media plugs and our project plugs. So you can find me at Compenderizer. Sabrina, what is your Twitter handle?
On Twitter, you can find me at Sabs Clarke. That's at SABSCLARKE.
And we can see what tribe you are on your bio at this point. I'm sure, but
I know I'm looking it up legit as we speak.
Brandon, where can people find you on social media and any projects, anything? Keep in mind this is coming out on February 14th. Anything you want to plug that people might want to look out for?
Of course. Oh, it wouldn't be Marvel related, but I'll get to that. So first things first, for social media, for Twitter, you can find me at BCKESSO. That's BCKESSO. And for the Rising Young Minds, you can find them at THE_RYM. That's at the rhyme. By the time this episode comes out, I'm working on a Drake retrospective piece, looking at 10 years of Drake's career. So that will be coming out because it will be 10 years since So Far Gone, the mixtape that launched his now infamous career. And so, yeah, be on the lookout for that on the Rising Young Minds page.
Awesome. Karma, the Blurred Girl. I already said your social media, but if you want to reiterate that and anything we should be looking out for by the time this goes up on the 14th.
Yeah, I am the Blurred Girl, TheBlerdGurl, and I'm basically the same all over. Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, etc. But I kind of get mail on Twitter. I'm there a lot. And I'm always working on a bunch of different things. Like I mentioned, by the time this is out, you will be able to hear a podcast that I did with Angelique Roche on the Radical Geeks with April Rain. You will also be able to see some video of me. Fox was nice enough to fly me out to New Zealand, and I got to go to the Weta digital set to check out Alita Battle Angel, and I got to do some mocap with Robert Rodriguez, which was amazing.
Okay, yeah, whatever. Humble brag.
So casual.
Fine, secure the bag.
So that video will be up by the time this airs. So please check it out over at theblurredgirl.com.
Hey. Whew, okay, well, you can subscribe to AP Marvel on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or any podcast service, really. Please leave us a review. We love hearing your thoughts. We love people calling us out. That way we can, get better. We have a Patreon. Be kind. Yeah, what?
But please be kind.
Oh, yes, be kind.
Be respectful.
Yes, be nice. Yeah. Be nice.
Constructive criticism. We have a Patreon, patreon.com/APMarvel, where you can contribute to us as we try to pay writers, artists, podcast guests. We have a Medium, that's medium.com/AP-Marvel, where you can see all of our written work and also our summaries of our podcast episodes. We're on Discord. There should be a link in the show notes where you can join our Discord discourse. As always, thanks to Charles Villanueva for the graphics, thanks to Steve Model for the theme song Jazz Vengers, and thanks to our top Patreons, especially James Coran, who I'll mention by name because I'm legally required to by the bounds of our own Patreon campaign. But yeah, so that's the end of part 1. If these guys are still down, we're gonna record part 2 like right now. But you should be hearing from us about the end of Black Panther and their international outreach a week from today. So stay tuned. We got some more good stuff coming at you. Goodbye.
Bye.